Well, welcome back to Talking Chi. I'm Javi, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Nona. Today we are joined with Grandmaster Marilyn Cooper, who started out in the mid 1960s as an art student and a kung fu artist. First, started her first school in 1980 in New York City. She's been published in articles and television interviews, and founded the national nonprofit institute Pushing for Peace, whose mission is to promote a Tai Chi program designed to help prevent youth violence and promote mental and physical health. The Peace Games are taught all around the world now. And welcome to the show, Marilyn. Welcome back. It's great to have you. It's always great to be with you. And we understand that um, in light of recent events, you're quite galvanized, and I imagined feeling feeling. Well, you tell us how you're feeling in terms of what's happening when, in current events, and and how this program started, and where you're at today with it.
All right. Well, of course, everybody's still really upset about what happened in Uvalde, of course. And I have to say that I've had an easier time getting the peace games going in Europe. It's they're much people are much more receptive. It's been more of a struggle in the U.S., but I feel like it's more needed here because this is the belly of the beast where we have the biggest problem. There's the they have the problems definitely like well when I taught at a school in Germany, this is a few years. This was in 2019, and we were a lot of the kids were Syrian refugees, and we were in our minds trying to make the refugee kids feel more at home in Germany, and the German kids more connected to the refugee kids, and that was a subtext. But and we've had I think we've done the peace games the most in Paris. They're very receptive in Paris. Um, but the U.S., where it's the most needed, it's kind of difficult to get it going. But I feel like this is where we really it you know it's needed the most here. So we just have to work harder. It's really difficult to, like, I tried to connect with the faculty at Parkland after that last horror, and they were unresponsive, and you know the um, the issue constantly comes up about changing the gun laws, which of course I agree with that. I dislike guns intensely. That was one of the things that I liked about Kung Fu, and then even more about Tai Chi, because you're not you're using weapons almost symbolically, like primitive, like swords, and it's not gunplay. I don't like guns at all personally, but that all this equivocating about changing the gun laws, where what we need are peaceful classrooms. And the final word on that is that the children are like the canaries in the coal mine. They are a reflection of what's going on in general in our society.
That's interesting. Let's talk about when you first became inspired to get this program together, and that initial event, and what was going on and what happened. Um, I believe it was the Columbine. And when was that? What year?
Right. That was 1999, the Columbine massacre. Um, and I was, teaching my kids kung fu classes, and I remember a teenage girl was in my class, and she said, "Why can't they teach this instead of PE. This is so much cooler. Several high school kids said that to me, and junior high kids. And so I brought a guy out that had recently published an article in a popular magazine that at the time called Inside Kung Fu about teaching Tai Chi to kids in the public schools. And I brought him to give a talk at our Little River Kung Fu school. And he mostly talked about his own personal experiences growing up in the Bronx and how his brother was killed in a drive-by shooting, and he adopted his niece and raised her as his own. So it was inspiring, but I still didn't have any clue as to how to teach something that was basically ancient Chinese, takes a lot of patience, designed for elders, to teach that to kids. And so he just said, well, you know, just go try and just do it. So it took 3 years, but and it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation. And what I've come to realize is that it was the kids who really created these games. It, you know, trying to teach them traditional Tai Chi forms and get them to perform them was a fool's errand. It was there were a few kids, there's always a few exceptional kids, right? Most of them just weren't having it. So the games evolved from me trying to impose my art on a bunch of unwilling children, and the kids' playfulness, and you know, we had that experience recently at your school, Nona, in Bryceland.
Let's say you're talking to a teacher who doesn't know anything about, let's say a teacher in the US who doesn't know anything about Tai Chi or Kung Fu or anything like that. What would you say to that teacher? How could you help them? What would the kids gain? And then what essentially would be the program?
Okay, so how would I pitch it just straight up to regular school teachers? And see, Nona's preconditioned because she's so advanced in Qigong and trained herself so extensively. So she was open to these ideas. But well, one good point is that you do not have to be a Kung Fu master or a devoted meditator or you know, a yogi to teach the peace games. They have, you know, anybody can do them, anybody can play them, and they only have positive side effects. So I would, how to pitch it to a teacher is you know, you try to get it down to about 3 sentences because teachers are really busy, and one of their big problems is they have like an agenda and they're trying to get through a program, and they're reluctant to give up even an hour out of their week to something else because they're worried they'll fall behind with what they're required to give the kids. So that is problematic. That is problematic. I mean, one thing is that it gives kids techniques for paying attention, for learning how to focus their energy, for relieving stress, so that those are all problems that kids have that make their learning experience or the teacher's teaching experience more difficult, is trying to get kids who are nervous and unsettled and stressed out and you know, in some years back, kids that were diagnosed, I don't know if this is still a thing, but with attention deficit, and given drugs so they would sit still and at least appear to be assimilating information. At least they weren't jumping out of their seat, and you know. So there's all this is the problems that are pre-existing just within the classroom alone. 4 teachers and 4 kids are huge. I would also say that learning the peace games for the teacher is going to help the teacher. Because some of these games are solo. And to call them games, it's a lighthearted way. It's very serious stuff. You're actually doing very, very serious stuff that I've devoted my life to working on. So, and it's a lot about internal development and looking within, turning inward.
The idea of transmission speaks to me, actually, which is something that we talk about in terms of like lineage and passing down the art from master to disciple. This notion of transmission, I think even in like monasteries, when you say that even the teacher should learn it, which totally makes sense. And what does that mean, and what is being transmitted, if you will, let's say, from facilitator to teacher and teacher to student?
Well, if the teacher can embrace any of these practices for themselves, then they'll transmit them with a lot more conviction, and it'll enhance their personal lives too. Because I think they have one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. Just having been in the classroom, just even for half a day, it takes like a week to recover. I mean, I teach people who pay me lots of money because they want to learn what I have, and that's a whole different vibe when you've got, people are coming to you from far. They drive a long way and they give you money. They actually contribute money to Pushing for Peace. That's where my teaching salary goes. But they believe in this work for themselves, so they understand. And they've all been through the peace games. Everybody that learns traditional forms from me also learns the peace games. So they understand the mission, and I think they feel really good about it. Anyway, I think I strayed from the question as usual.
Let's hear some insight from a teacher's perspective. And is there a teacher around?
So, listening to you talk, Marilyn, about peace games and the experience, going back to Javi's first question about pitching it to a teacher, you finished up by saying that it provides the student opportunity for going inside, to go within. And I think that that's definitely one of the foremost, most vital skill for all kinds of other types of learning. For a student, is so much of a student's life in the classroom is based on learning something external to themselves: math, social studies, science, language arts. Maybe language arts, models looking inward and comparing oneself to a character, whatnot. But everything else is very external. The other students that they're interacting, that's all very external. So having some part of their learning be structured around what is it like to go internally and take a look at what's happening there, and then to play with that awareness at the forefront, then learn how to interact in a way that might cause anxiety or nervousness or different types of situations. I think that is one of the biggest selling points for me. If I were to not know much about the practice and then see what was being offered to the kids, just a different, even a different approach to being in a classroom, where it's not just about the material being learned or facts being learned or skill being learned that has to do with something outside of yourself. Although in the end we come around, and everything is the wholeness and the oneness of all of it. But really just to start with what's inside the body and the mind, the emotional landscape, the spiritual landscape. I think that's a prerequisite to someone being emotionally sound, able to navigate emotional upset, and controversy with another person, being solid and centered in oneself. And so, when I know we've talked a lot about peace games, and when you talk about, the response to Columbine, when you first started, that aha of like, if everyone knew how to do this practice, then we wouldn't have this issue. And that, I think it's central, that internal understanding is central to that idea, and that conviction that peace games would work, right? It's that internal piece. So I think that's great that that's what you mentioned. And then the other thing you keep talking about is how difficult it is to present something that students aren't there signed up to do, right? They didn't come to school in order to learn this. How do you connect with them? And the brilliance of you're turning it into a game, and hearing that it was a co-collaboration with all the kids that you've worked with. I want to go back to the book that you're working on. I understand you're writing a book. I've seen a early copy of this publication that you're working on, and it goes through some of the stories of these early adventures into the classroom, and I can connect with that so closely as a first year teacher, experiencing the same kinds of like bewilderment and confusion and trial and error, and just, I think at one point you're saying something about the kids are gonna like eat you alive or something along those lines, and just you have to be ready. You have to know what you're doing and be ready to give your offering to the kids in a way that they are able to access, or things are going to go into mass chaos. And that's what it feels like with every lesson for me too. You have to know what the kids are capable of and how to meet them where they are at. So that was really gave me, you've done the time, in the classroom.
Yeah. If they sense weakness, or if there's empty space, they will fill it. Yeah, you have to have a really tightly knit program. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so there's strength in each of the activities in the Peace Game booklet. And the kids sense it, watching you work with my kids and having gone with you to other schools and watching the kids engage. They are fully engaged. They are enjoying themselves. It's a memorable activity. It's something that they're going to think back on and remember and say, oh yeah, this one time we had a race where the slowest person was the winner. And that's gonna, there's a little shift in the paradigm that happens even with just that introduction of a concept. So
well,
I think it's
because of bringing in John Ford, I became more aware of the need to introduce the game at the beginning, like an intro, and then as a follow-up after each game, let each kid comment about their own personal experience. So it's brought to conscious awareness verbally, and they're going to hold it in their minds more because they have words for it there, and they're going to remember the feelings better because it's been put to words. So that was a really important piece. It does make the game experience take longer, and if you have more kids, it even takes longer. So I think ideally the peace games could be spread out over a few days, like maybe 3 a day and a 3-day there's ways to do this so that the kids aren't overwhelmed. And I think another
So like a
really
3-day
important, yeah,
so like a
like
3-day
maybe,
workshop.
yeah, like maybe like an hour and a half, but just a half hour of games or something. Because, well, it also might be a result of just coming out of the pandemic, where kids are almost like, are we allowed to touch each other? Should we even be in this close of proximity? There's a whole other thing that's been going on now with a lot of, I would say, mass confusion of not really knowing, am I going to make someone sick if I breathe on them? So yeah,
Can
but I
I
think that,
backtrack a little bit, Marilyn, for
yeah,
our listeners who aren't aware? You mentioned with the integration of John Ford's program, and I don't think our listeners would know what that is. Would you like to speak about what that offering is, what program you're now trying to merge peace games with? Can you describe that a little bit, or I
sure.
can help with it
And
as well?
before you do that,
Okay.
just want to remind listeners, this is Talking Chi. I'm Javi, and here with Nona. We're talking with Grandmaster Marilyn Cooper here about the Tai Chi Peace Games and how they can help kids in schools, and how this was actually created for kids in schools to help reduce stress, resolve conflict, and increase creativity.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and
so
empathy. I think the empathy part is, kids come to realize consciously that they have a lot in common. There's more commonality than there are differences, and I think that's a really important piece, because what we're seeing in these sort of outlier characters that go back and kill kids, that most recently this kid knew he wasn't going to graduate. He was it he I think he hurt his own grandmother. I mean, he had a horrible homes at home situation. Um, but anyway, back to what you were saying, that John Ford's developed something called the empathy set, based on the work of Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication, and it's a very effective tool, especially for adults. But it proved a little cumbersome in the context of the peace games, because it was difficult to integrate the card experience with the peace games experience. But one piece of his program segued really well, and that was the talking stick. So that's the piece that I think it was a missing piece, to let the kids sort of decompress after each game and talk about their experiences a little bit with each other, which makes the whole thing take longer, but it makes a much bigger impression. And you don't know how you're planting seeds. You don't know how down the line, if how this is going to affect the choices they make as they grow older, just having been introduced to these feelings and concepts during their formative years. Uh, but I've only seen positive side effects. I've never seen anything negative as an outgrowth of this kind of training.
Yeah, so to be more specific, the empathy set provides, for listeners that don't know, the empathy set provides people with two decks of cards, feelings and needs, and gives someone an opportunity to put a name to a feeling that they are experiencing, whether it's a positive feeling or a quote unquote negative feeling. And then it helps a person to also articulate and even decipher what need that is being met, and providing the positive feeling, or not being met and providing the uh, non-positive, the unwanted feeling, and helping that to be a bridge to the person that they are engaged with or interacting with or experiencing um, a situation with.
Well, the thing I've found from using the empathy set, that's the most interesting thing, is that when you recognize consciously what your feelings and needs are, you don't even have to talk to the other person. It's your own internal process, and there you have a shift internally within yourself just from recognizing and identifying, and somehow everything shifts. It's pretty fascinating. It's really fascinating. It's a lot like meditation. A lot of that kind of thing happens if you spend at least 20 minutes in sincere, seated or seated meditation. Standing meditations is different. I would recommend seated meditation for those mental, emotional shifts.
Let's see if we can break down the reduction of stress, resolving conflict, and increasing creativity. How can we convey the peace games to people and tell people that, hey, this program is going to help kids reduce their stress or anxiety, um, and
Well,
help them, give them tools to resolve conflicts in themselves and with others.
I think it would make sense to talk about each game individually then, because there's 9 games, and what are they exactly? So why don't you just ask me the right
Let's
questions,
start
and
with,
I'll
with let's start with the first one.
start with
Two
number 1.
becomes
And
one.
they're in a particular order. They're ordered, the
So I'll
sequence
list
is
them off
important.
here are the 9 games, and for those watching the video, this is what the book looks like. The 9 games are two becomes one, operator, turtle races, lead the follower, follow the leader, sword fingers, glider, come here, go away, dog chases its tail, and push the turtle. And for those that are not familiar with Chinese culture, a lot of names are given to movements as a result of observing animals in nature. So you have a lot of animals. But let's start with the first one. Two becomes one.
Okay. Well, we're talking about non-duality. So a lot of times, we go through life thinking if then, or if I do this, then they'll do that, or, just not coming from center. And well, this is anecdotal, but this is a funny thing about the original name for Two Becomes One, which was Be the Chair, because the posture, your back is very straight, your legs are at right angles, you look like a chair with like an armchair when you sit. And but when we had my student and his wife Haiyan write it in Chinese characters, um, and it kept reading as B Chairman Mao, so we had to change it. It didn't work, so we changed it to Two Becomes One. Anyway, so that game is a solo game, and that is when students are given a body frame from which they can turn inward and pretty much uh, zone out on the external noise that they're constantly dealing with, like, get up for school and join the football team and get an A, and, just get into their inside, what's going on internally. So, and just relax and let all that stuff just regurgitate. And it's the same for everybody. Meditation is the same for everybody. And it's a daily discipline. Sometimes I take a day off because I don't want it to be a crutch, and I don't want to do it just to say, well, I meditate every day. So, I do take time off from these practices. And that's the best one to start with.
Is this kind of like, before we move on to the next one, sometimes I like to use the snow globe idea. You shake the snow globe, and when it settles, the particles settle. In this sense, when the practitioner sits down, is it sort of like they're letting everything just settle, and that's the feeling of calmness and settledness, maybe rootedness and relaxation that you're looking for?
Well, I mean, if that analogy works for you, go for it. My experience is always different. Every time I meditate, it's a different thing because you're always changing and there's always different stuff going on. And sometimes stuff comes up that's from 40 years ago, or it's something you think is totally extraneous, and it's still in your internal makeup, and it's an unresolved issue, and it floats to the surface, and you go, wow, I didn't even know that was still a thing. And like the empathy set, just recognizing it causes it to shift. It's not like you have to go out and do something, some sort of behavior to change something in the world from it's something that happened like 10 years ago to you that you didn't even think was an issue. So it's very interesting what happens when you meditate. It's fascinating.
Can I ask you or kind of comment about the two times that I've seen you facilitate it? One was with the younger group in when we went out to
Winters.
Yeah. And I think they were first graders, and they sat very, very nicely and were very proud of what they were doing. And it seemed I was like really, really blown away at these little guys able to sit nice and tall and in this peaceful state. And then I had you come to my classroom with 5th and 6th graders, and they took them a while to settle in. And I had done some meditative practices with them before, but shorter spurts, and they definitely get bored, struggle with it, come out of it, or have other energies that come up, and that takes them to a different place.
They want to laugh.
They fidget. They want to giggle. There's a lot going on. It's hard for them to just do that for themselves. And so I watched you and I think your
persistence,
martial teacher background of being stern with them and being patient but consistent and more disciplined than their undisciplined, repetitive off-taskness in that moment of like bringing them back more than I would have done as a beginning teacher of this for young people. I was just surprised at how persistent you were. And then when they finally hit that, after so many times of where the feeling in the room that shifted as they dropped into that zone.
There was a shift. Definitely.
And how much work it took for you to get them there. And me as a beginning teacher realizing, oh, that's how much it's going to take at this age and with where they are at their development to get them to a place where they can get a taste of what that might feel like. And some of them more so. Mm-hmm.
I can't help but remember that little girl in Winters when I said, oh, you should close your eyes. And she said, I can't close my eyes because if I close my eyes, I'll start crying because my mom just died. Oh my God. That was just an overwhelming moment. Anyway, those, if you're trying to be a meditation teacher of that type of meditation to that demographic, to kids, it's like heightened. You have to just, almost be like a bird that's looking that's looking down for worms to go back to the nest and feed their starving. You have to just be like super looking at everybody, just who's slouching, who's fidgeting, and just pounce on every little thing each time. So after a while, they're like, sit up straight and don't let your head loll forward, and then the body goes into some sort of it's not numb, but there's an energy stream where you're not crimped up anywhere, and so then the mind body stream can just flow when a lot of kids, when you tell them to meditate and they immediately plop down, cross their legs, or go into a full lotus and do this copycat thing of something they've seen, and they're like, see, look, Ma, I'm meditating, and bullshit, they're just sitting like a pretzel and copying a picture in their head of what they think meditation is. So yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky.
And I think, it seemed to me that you were lending them your discipline, right? Like you have
Yeah,
cultivated this discipline as the teacher. You're loaning that to them by doing that work of coming back to that centeredness, coming
well,
back to that
that's
stillness
why
over
I
and
really
over.
recommend that the teachers learn the games for themselves.
Right. That's where I was thinking that would go, is going back to what you said about what benefit would it be for a teacher to have this experience, is that if they have that discipline, they're better able to lend it to the
Yeah,
struggling student who really needs
absolutely.
to have that extra push to get there. And something that you said really struck me in that moment is that you said to the students, the stricter you are with yourself, the more you'll get out of this. And that idea of a student providing themselves with their own discipline is, as opposed to having it come from externally, I think that
Yeah,
was a really powerful idea that you gave to them in that moment, that helped them facilitate, like, oh, I see, like, this is about me taking control over myself and being the one who's strict with myself in
yeah,
getting myself to do this. So
yeah,
that was really great facilitation. Yeah.
I think that's a huge key in terms of this is what Dr. Young talked about sometimes. Discipline is great, but self discipline is even better. But the self discipline is harder because discipline requires someone dictating to you what it is to be disciplined. So you're learning to be disciplined. But once you're able to be self disciplined, then you have independence. And that really speaks to me in terms of, if we could take a side tangent here, in terms of law, regulation, and what is required to have a shift in society so that kids stop killing one another, or for anyone of that matter in the world can stop killing one another. It's this notion of self discipline and this independence rather than someone else externally, lawmakers or regulators, telling you or telling someone else what it is to be disciplined, or what the laws are going to be to keep you safe and to keep everyone else safe, rather than taking claim of your own power, your own energy, your own mind, um, so that you can self-regulate and those around you can all be self-regulated for this,
yeah,
you know, better place, if you will.
yeah. Well, I think that's one of the reasons that historically and currently we have retreat centers for people to try to have a shift in their habitual patterns of behavior and embrace disciplines like this, and then see how much they can enhance their everyday lives if they can bring that discipline back to them, back with them, and somehow fit it into the pattern of their own existence.
Let's talk about the next one.
Next game, okay, is Operator. Game number
Yeah,
2, Operator.
yeah. So funny thing about operator is that uh, next Friday I'm going to be at my sister's in LA for a Shabbat, which is like a Jewish ritual dinner on Friday night where everybody. She's also a Buddhist, so there's a term, a Jew boo, and that's my sister Natasha and her husband Todd. Anyway, and they love the peace games. She's a school guidance counselor, and she uses the peace games with some of her students. So, and her daughters taught the peace games at their Buddhist youth camp when she's gone away at Buddhist youth camp. But anyway, operator is a really fun thing that you can do while seated around before you eat. Like, because there's right now there's atheists versus non-atheists, and atheists will sit there patiently while people say grace, to be respectful, but they're internally rolling their eyes like, yeah, I'm not buying it. But it's nice to pause before you like stuff your face. And to give gratefulness or gratitude. I think it's in Japanese culture, and it's not saying anything to a god, isn't it? It's just being thankful for a meal you're about to eat, right? So that's a wonderful practice. But anyway, operators are a really fun thing to do around. You can do it seated around a table, but we do it standing. We do operators standing. And they get some concepts too about yin faces heaven, yang faces earth, touching the lao. They learn a little bit about the center of the palms being the lao gong points. They learn about that touch rather than grabbing, a light touch. And they're carrying the posture of the erect back, lifting the crown point to heaven, the grounding of the feet into earth, into standing. So it's kind of a trick to get them to do standing meditation. That's another funny part of it. And it's also a great tool for teachers, because as the kids are standing in the circle and passing energy, which kind of looks like when you see a wave at a football game where, like the stadium where you see the shape go around. So it's like that. But it's an energy wave. But you can see the teacher as guide can look and notice the one kid that's got an attitude like, this is stupid. They're not sunk into gravity. They'll be standing on one leg. They'll be, their posture will be kind of slouchy, or they'll be looking around like, this game's dumb. But then the other kids are trying to make the energy go around the circle. And so this has got to do with peer pressure too, because the kids will want to get on to the next game. They want to get this game done so they can play the next one. So they'll get mad at that kid and say, pay attention, the energy's getting stuck, and so the peer pressure makes the energy flow. So the operator is really a great game. It's really fun. It brings a lot out in, the kids are starting to get like, wow, if I pay attention, it's going to feel good and I'll have fun, and then I can play another game. Plus, it's darn interesting to just feel the flow of energy through your body. It's such a deconstruction. It's so simple. And it's something that we take for granted and we don't appreciate.
I should mention that for this game, the practitioners are standing all in a circle with the hands connected, and the facilitator is at the top of the circle, who sends the energy to one side of the circle, and the kids pass it around, and then the facilitator then receives it and lets everyone know that it's been received. I like the ideas of being present and then also listening, and dropping into sensing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like extending that sensing from the. Oh.
Say again, Marilyn. We missed that. Say again.
Some people like to call push hands sensing hands too.
And just elaborate on that. So, what is sensing hands, and what might be the benefit here in that regard?
Well, you're asking what is push hands? It's a Tai Chi two-person exercise where two people try to off-balance each other and absorb force and emit force. So it's sort of a recycling of energy. And a lot of the peace games are definitely an outgrowth of that Tai Chi exercise called push hands. Yeah.
And in order to for that to facilitate that, there needs to be an energy of sensing. And so this game.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
it's initiated with a slight movement, and the last piece is where everyone's still and just feels energy without moving, and then everybody just takes their palms off of the touching of each other and makes a ball-like shape and presses it to their lower dantian, right below their navel, and breathes into their hands, so that they're pulling the energy back to themselves and inside into their own center.
And I would also say that, and I would also say that, like, if we were like presenting this to a teacher or someone who doesn't know anything about it, this notion of listening and sensing can be integrated into daily life, in the sense that the body's always trying to communicate messages in terms of what's going on with it and what might need to be addressed or adjusted. And they say that, you know, the body whispers until it eventually has to scream, and that's when an injury or something has to come up. So this notion of us being calibrating our sensing and feeling to catch those subtle changes and those subtle issues so that we can address them is crucial, I'd say.
Yeah. Like, I mean, imagine if people had been more sensitive to that kid Ramos, with, you know, who lisped, who stuttered, who ended up disfiguring himself, cutting up his own face before he killed, you know, 19 people. So yeah, sensitivity is definitely a key component. Awareness and sensitivity.
I want to remind listeners, this is Talking Chi. I'm Javi here with Nona. We're talking with Grandmaster Marilyn Cooper. We're going through the Peace Games manual here, and this was designed for schools after the 1999 massacre in Columbine, to help give kids tools for reducing stress, resolving conflict, increasing creativity, and offering one another empathy.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the turtle races. That sort of flips the script on its head, I'd say, huh?
Yeah. So kids love turtle races, and that's one that even pre-K can do that one. So typically, of course, kids are always trying to beat each other and get to the finish line, across the finish line first, and win the prize, or, you know, make the football team or whatever. And this is completely the opposite. So the person who gets across last wins. So it's already, you know, playing with their minds about the idea of competition. And it involves a lot of patience and self-control. It does the same thing as Tai Chi. Reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, makes you feel calm. It stretches the tendons because you're trying to get them to move out into space, to move big. So yeah, that was a really fun game, and I actually learned a new thing, and it was because of John's talking stick, to hold it up like a mic at the end and talk to the kids, because this is funny, because you've seen this, you know, with sportscasters, and just go around to each kid, or at least several of them, and say, so how are you feeling out there? And have them talk, you know. So that was a funny moment.
That's cool.
Yeah, something I like to add to turtle races.
You know, I want to say about
really bored and sleepy, or, you know, I was happy,
you know what,
to
really
lose.
I like this because I think it helps to balance over competitiveness. In the sense, and also this idea of doing quickly, getting it done, in contrast to just being. This is something I'm working on. Yeah.
There's a lot of doing in school, right?
There's a lot of doing. There's the goal, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what this kid in Uvalde, one of the things possibly he was struggling with, and the fact that he wasn't graduating, the other
Yeah.
kids were graduating in this small town. I heard a news reporter saying that they had put up pictures along the road of all the graduating kids.
Yeah.
And if you're not graduating, you're not there. You're not, and if you're not there, you're not in your cohort. You're not in your peer group. And if you're not in your group, you're isolated. You're
You're a loser.
disconnected.
You're gonna be a loser, right? You're gonna just end up on the
Yep.
street. You have no future. You might as well be dead. And yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible way to make kids feel. A terrible way to make kids. Those aren't the only
It's
options.
dysfunction. It's so untrue too. It's just not reality.
I dropped out of school in 10th grade after Kennedy got assassinated. I was in an AP program for the smart kids, and I just, looked around me and said, "This is bullshit. I'm out. I'm going to find something else to." Well, I moved to New York and went to art school, but I was just not. I didn't want to be part of mainstream society, and it seemed like nothing I wanted to partake in at all. But I think that things have improved somewhat. I think the schools are better than they were when we couldn't wear pants to school. If you didn't make the cheerleading team or the football team, you were a loser. Those were terrible times. The 50s, when I was in elementary school, we had to go under our desks and put our hands on our necks in case the Russians dropped a nuke. People were building, what do you call it? Underground, dugout.
Oh, bunkers.
Yeah, yeah. Those were, if people think that the good old days were good, they weren't. We had, in elementary school, we had to say the Lord's Prayer. I never did. And the Pledge of Allegiance. I never did. But, I was raised by socialists and from an early age was questioning everything that was going on around me.
Marilyn, we've got less than 7 minutes. Got about 7 minutes here. I wanted to.
Right.
We haven't gotten through. We haven't gotten through all the games, but I really would like you to say something. If you had the resources to, what would this program look like in this country for you? What would you be doing with this program? Where and to what capacity?
So, you mean would more money help? I'm not sure. I would love to build. Truthfully, the most successes I've had have been through teachers. I've talked to principals and I've had no luck. And I've and students just want it, but they can't get me to come there. But it's the teachers that. So what I would love to have a retreat center where teachers could get this training, and where they could actually learn things that they can do for themselves too, like have it be kind of not a monastic setting, but definitely a retreat where they could change their own personal habits and learn techniques to make them less stressed and more coming from a calm inner space, and then learn the games to teach in their classroom at a pace where, because there's so many more public school teachers and charter school teachers than there are Tai Chi masters or even Tai Chi students who want to become Peace Games ambassadors. So in order for it to have the most impact, it would be to have a place where we could invite teachers and have funds to give scholarships to underpaid teachers, which I think are in Uvalde for sure. Like some of those teachers maybe couldn't even afford to come afford the plane ticket if this place is, you know, in a faraway place like that. It would be good for them to get away from society and into a quiet, natural, peaceful environment, and do the peace games and feel how great they make you feel, and then they could return to their busy classrooms in urban areas and bring some of that peacefulness with them and convey that to their students. Yeah, that's what I would wish for. In case anybody out there hears this, yeah, help me build a retreat center. Are you on mute?
Sorry about that. So how can people help support you and this program and your efforts?
Well, Pushing for Peace is a nonprofit. We have fundraisers on Facebook. There's a free YouTube channel, so you can do some of these practices for yourself. Yeah, anybody can donate for sure. I mean, you know, if anybody's got a brilliant idea or tons of money and wants to really build this retreat center, hit me up. I'm down. We can make this happen. Yeah. People from all over the world will come to it, and it'll be a rockin' good time. I mean, I won't always be there, but I know other people such as you who can help run it. So.
Well, I do like this notion of the retreat center because the immersion experience is really where the shift happens.
Yeah.
And the retreat center is the setting for immersion.
That's right. No distractions. Everybody's working on the same thing together. Yeah. The team, the cohesiveness of the group experience where everybody's, you know, goal centric to try to assimilate this information. Yeah, and boy, teachers need a break too. Geez, get away from the kids. Oh my God.
What do you think as a teacher?
Hang out with grown-ups.
As a retreat, I think a teacher would have to know what that's like and what benefits could be experienced to commit to something and do it. Yeah, I would.
You couldn't say that, you know, hey, teachers, come to this retreat because it's going to minimize violence in your school, because you're not really addressing the kids, but you are servicing the teacher.
You could absolutely say that. Hell yeah, I would say that. Yeah. Help create a less stressful, nonviolent classroom with less bullying and more considerate, empathetic classmates. Absolutely. That's totally what you want to say. And you know, help them feel more peaceful in their daily lives too. Give them techniques for themselves to feel more peaceful. Good grief.
Well, I really would like to see this take off. I'd love to be a part of another retreat center. That would be great. And I love these games, and also the subtleties that are in these games, and the subtleties provided, the learning, the discipline, and the skill that one can embody should they decide to take the practice and the discipline on. We're at a point where you know, we all need to contribute something to the cause. So I want to thank you for being with us.
It upsets everybody when these things happen. You know, it affects the whole. It affects the whole nation. It's just all my students could talk. My Tai Chi students could talk about nothing else for the week. Most of them are mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers. One's a great grandfather. Yeah, everybody's just noticeably upset. And actually they have to share and unload their grief about it before they can settle down and get on with their own forms and making themselves feel better. So yeah, we're all profoundly affected by these things.
Marilyn, we'll be in touch, and we're going to finish these games in another talk and go through them more. And we're going to continue talking and brainstorming, game planning, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for being with us again.
Okay.